Hello, everyone. Good morning. We're so excited to be back with Life on Purpose Live. We have some interesting topics today, tough, but we're going to talk about things that need to be talked about. We have Hillary Morgan Ferrer. She's coming with us. She is the founder of Mama Bear Apologetics. She's written several books. We're going to talk about those throughout the day. So we're just excited to have her. And we're going to talk about what a lot of us are seeing play out in the cultural struggles of today. And she's done the research and has some information that we believe is very helpful to many that are struggling with this. So Hillary, welcome. I'm so glad to have you. Nope, you're muted.
There you go.
There you are. There you are. So welcome. Technology is so fun, and then we hit the wrong button and it's like, oh my gosh, what happened? So Mama Bear Apologetics. So how does one come up? I mean, most people don't think, okay, I'm going to become an expert in apologetics. It sounds so cerebral. So how did that become God's call for you?
Yeah, so I actually was into apologetics from the time I was 12. And I always say, while faith in Jesus Christ saved my life, apologetics saved my faith. And that's why a lot of on our Mama Bear Apologetics podcast, we say this might not affect your faith, but it might affect your children's. And so because I saw the way apologetics allowed me to, despite what I ever had going on in my life, I struggled in the past with depression and anxiety. I have a lot of chronic health conditions, but the one thing I never had to figure out was, is this true? Because I had done this study to say, well, this is true. And it doesn't matter how it's working. It doesn't matter how I feel about it. I could still place my faith in the Christian faith. The fact that Jesus Christ died, rose again to save me. That was something that I could just relax in. And I think a lot of people, their faith kind of has a tendency to get better or worse depending on the circumstances in their life.
Right.
And I saw this as being one of the things that really grounded my faith. And so that's how I got interested in apologetics. But it was several years back before I started Mama Bear Apologetics that I heard something from a friend who worked with women in apologetics. And she was saying that there was this really large demographic out there who wouldn't read something unless it was by women for women. And I always knew that I was kind of one of the minority women that were in the crowd when I was listening to apologetics talks. But as soon as she said that, is like a light bulb went off in my head. And I said, it wasn't just, oh my gosh, who's reaching the women? My first thought is, who's reaching the moms? Because I think moms are just absolutely that youth pastor in the home. They are the ones that get all the questions first. I'm sure as parents and as moms, y'all can attest that you could be in the bathtub having this nice bubble bath and shaving your legs, and your husband is out on the couch just, drinking a soda and watching TV. And if your kid needs that pickle jar opened, they come to mom in the bathtub, not the dad who's sitting right there in front of them. Because
so true.
Right? Yeah. And like any question I have, that goes to mom. And so moms should be our absolutely forefront people that we are equipping in this.
Yeah. So let's talk about the word apologetics, because, it's a confusing word. It's a Bible word. Basically, it means to be able to defend your faith with facts and also sometimes with your story. So explain that word and why you use that word, because I think that's an important perspective.
Yeah, so there's another apologetics organization that I think has summarized it in the best possible way. They're called Reasons to Believe. That's exactly what apologetics is giving reasons to believe something. And I think people think of apologetics, they only hear Christian apologetics, or they only hear people who fight about nuances and, no, we have this number of manuscripts or that number of manuscripts. But I would say that we are all apologists for something. I'll give you an example. My mother, you cannot, like all my friends know this, you cannot talk to her for more than 5 minutes without her finding out if you own an Instant Pot. And if you don't own an Instant Pot, why don't you own an Instant Pot? And could you not afford one? Because she's willing to buy it for you. And she has bought my friends Instant Pots before. So it's something that has radically changed her life, that she feels very passionately about, that she wants other people's lives to be changed in the ways that her life was changed. And you'll see this with guys, when they talk about who's the greatest, football player, or my husband, he will give you reasons why, this band is objectively superior to that band. So when we think about apologetics in terms of things that we truly believe in, that have affected our lives, and that we want other people to have the same effect, and we want them to kind of come to the same conclusions that we have, because it's something that we can share, or we just think it's objectively true. That is apologetics. So if we are going to be as passionate about the things that we're passionate about, some people it's homeschooling, some people it is the Awana program, some people it is this type of church or that type of church. If we're going to be that passionate about something, let's put that energy into saying Jesus Christ is the one who can transform our hearts. Here's the reasons to believe that he was actually a real person who lived historically, that he actually rose from the dead, that the Bible is God's word, not just because the Bible says so, but because we can actually trace the manuscripts of the Bible and see that they have stayed reliable. They've stayed accurate. It's like, this is what we're doing. And in terms of what I do with Mama Bear Apologetics, we're looking at cultural things and saying, whoa, what has happened with culture? It seems like God's plan is the path for flourishing. And here are our reasons why living under God's plan, this idea of objective truth, this idea of sex for marriage, all these different things. This is why I see this leading to flourishing. Here's all the reasons why, not because I just want to force my religion on you, but because I care about you and I want you to come to the conclusion that is going to make you as a human and as just a person of faith and as a spiritual being best flourish. So to me, that's what apologetics is.
And that's so well said, because, I do a lot of teaching and coaching and how to share your story, because, sharing your story is being able to say, here's what God has done in my life, not what I'm telling you he might do or could do. This is what he's done. So apologetics is bringing in the element of the story, but also the validity of the story of the Bible, because it's so historically accurate that people, but so many people don't know that. So that's one of the best ways to be able to say, but let me tell you why it is accurate. So do you find a lot of people, when you begin to give them facts about historical truths, they're surprised to find out how true it is?
Yeah. And you, not even just historical truths. I remember being in a doctor's office one day, and I got in conversation with the nurse, because that's what apologists do. We just kind of get in conversation about things. And she said something along the lines of like, I don't know, I just don't think I want to read a book that's just written by a bunch of old white guys. And so this was an assumption. This was a false assumption that she had about the Bible. I said, oh, that's interesting. Do you consider Middle Eastern white? And she was like, oh. And she had to this would be one of the cultural problems we have now that we may not have had 50 years ago. It's like as apologists, we're looking for what the barrier is to this person coming to faith in Christ. And then we're saying, how can I address that barrier? And that barrier is going to be different for different people. So if their barrier is the idea that they don't want something by a bunch of old dead white guys, well, let's talk about that. If their barrier is that, I was talking with a girl on an airplane, and she said, I just don't understand that. I'm in a theater program. I have a bunch of friends who are homosexual. How can I believe a book that says that this is a sin and that this is wrong? And I said, that's great, but let's go back a step. Because she claimed to be a Christian. I said, do you believe that Jesus Christ physically lived a sinless life, was the Son of God, died and rose again? And she just kind of thought about it. I said, because if you don't believe that, it doesn't matter what the Bible says about homosexuality. What she thought was the problem was not the problem. She wasn't convinced that Jesus actually lived and died and rose again, and that she could put her faith in that. And I'm saying, unless we go back to the basics there, it doesn't matter what he says about these other things. So it's sometimes taking them back to the foundation in order to build that faith on the way up. And this is going to be different for different people. And this is why I think we need not only women, but moms. I think moms are so great. We're all like little amateur counselors, aren't we? Trying to find out what's going on in people's lives. Talk to me about what's going on in your life. So using those skills to look for the barrier, and how can I take that barrier away if that barrier is preventing you from interacting with the God who can bring you peace.
So let's address that from a cultural perspective, because we know it's traceable. It's, statistically true that we're in an identity crisis as a nation of people.
Yes.
So loneliness is at an all-time high, though people are more connected. Depression, anxiety, all of that is off the charts. I mean, you try to make an appointment with a counselor, they'll tell you in 3 months when they're available because people are in such dire need of help.
Yeah.
And that's a cultural reality. But what you said is so true, because if people believe that God made them and loved them and gave them a purpose for their life, do you believe that we would still be having this international crisis of identity? Because people don't know who they are, so they're just trying whatever comes up in the culture. Okay, let me try that. Okay, that
Yeah.
didn't work. All right, let me try that. Okay, that didn't work. So if we went back to the foundation, would it matter if we really believed who God says we are?
Hmm. And I think I think that would be one of the issues that we could address. But what I would like to talk about is the cyclical nature of this anxiety and depression, and there's a word that's used in scripture called telos, and just in philosophy, the word telos means our basically the purpose for which we were created. And we see this in the animal kingdom, we see this everywhere, that animals have a telos, something that they were created to do. If anybody has one of those shepherding dogs and you put them around a bunch of kids, those dogs will start corralling those kids because they're sheep dogs. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
We have lost the idea that we as humans have a telos. We have a purpose for which we were created. When we are taken away from that purpose, we experience anxiety. However, on the opposite front, sometimes when we experience anxiety, we start looking for a cause and then we misidentify the cause. So let me give you an example in my life. For the longest time, I had this time every night that all of a sudden I started feeling worthless. I talk about this in the first book, to where my husband and I started calling it "I'm worthless o'clock." I'm like start talking about something that I'm really unsure. Have I done enough with this? And John will look at me and he's like, "Is it worthless o'clock?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I guess it is." I had anxiety that was coming in. And I think it's just somewhere in my life, I got it tied to where if I feel tired, then I'm worthless. And so there was like this anxiety that would come, and I started looking for, why am I feeling anxious? And I guarantee you, if you look for reasons to feel anxious, you can find them.
Yeah.
So what is happening with our kids right now is they're taking on, like, as a society, we have gotten away from what our telos is. We have gotten away from what it means to be a human. And so therefore we are having an absolute mental health crisis. But what happens is we're having oh golly, what would you call them? Just not advocates. What's the word? Activists who are coming alongside of our kids, and they're like, "Are you feeling anxious? Do you feel like you don't belong in your own skin? Do you feel like you're secretly someone else and no one knows?" And the kids sitting there going, "Oh my gosh, they're describing exactly
Yeah.
how I feel." And they say, "Well, if you feel this way, then it's probably because you're transgender, or it's probably because you're gay." And because they think that this person has just completely accurately described their situation, then they're accurately describing what the solution is. So,
Yeah.
on one hand, not following the telos, the purpose, the mandates from God that actually cause us to flourish, creates the anxiety. And then once we have the anxiety, we start looking for a reason that is sometimes completely not with Christ. And so this spiral, if we've seen this spiral going on in society, I think it's that both of these sides just feed off of each other until we're just spiraling into oblivion.
Yeah. And you see it, it's the quick fix mentality. Oh, let me just try this, or let me just try that.
Hmm.
And then when that doesn't work, we think it's we think we're off with God,
Yeah.
because
Hmm.
we're like, oh well, I tried that. I thought that was from God,
He has
and
not
that
given me the peace that passes all understanding. He must
right.
not exist.
Right. So then we assume the choices that we've made are the things that we've chosen to do. Instead of it drawing us towards God, it pushes us away from God,
Yep.
because we put him kind of in that box. So
Mhm.
let's talk about people, churches. You talk about churches don't know how to deal with so many of these issues, and I find that to
Mhm.
be true. Many don't talk about the identity crisis. We do talk about the Bible. We do talk about that God has a plan and a purpose. But what do you think? I mean, how can churches help as opposed to hurt the situation with this national crisis that so many people are feeling?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. We're kind of moving into a new era of kind of church therapeutic, which has some good aspects to it, and it also has some dangerous aspects to it. So I think we just need to really be able to balance the concept of truth, but also with that therapeutic aspect, that we have to consider that people are being held captive to bad ideas. And I think sometimes the church treats every problem like I can just lob a truth bomb at it. And then they say, well, the word of God will not, return void. So I'm just going to throw a Bible verse at it. If it doesn't work, then it's your rebellious heart. There's something that I call spiritual Stockholm syndrome. So Stockholm syndrome itself is when someone has been taken captive by someone, they've been abducted, and what that captor does is they form a relationship with the person who they have kidnapped until that kidnapped person feels closer with their captor than they do the people who are trying to free them. They will actually fight to protect the captor from the people that are trying to free them. I think we're seeing this happening with ideologies in our culture, that people have been taken captive by some of these dangerous ideologies. And we can't just run in there with guns blazing and saying, I'm going to save you. And they're like, hold on a minute, this person really loves me, or this ideology really gets me. What we have to do is we have to come in kind of that gently and slowly separate them from this ideology to show how this is not cohesive. This does not describe reality. This has not been helping you. And like, I've talked to many parents whose children have, once they decided that they were transgender, all the mental health stuff starts spiraling out almost uncontrollably, but the child could not see that. All they could see is their parent trying to get them away from this kind of safety blanket that they thought was helping. And they interpret their increased anxiety to being caused by the parent who's trying to separate them from this. So what the church can do better, we have to be very, very careful. Like, one of the things I've been studying a lot is the detransitioner stories. And we need to be aware that we cannot be mocking. It's so easy sometimes to mock things that we just think sound crazy, or like, who would believe that? We are about to have an influx of completely broken people who have been lied to by this trans ideology, and we need to be a safe place for them to come and receive healing. So I think the church seen it not just as ideas, but as people. But then again, the people in the church that only see people and they don't understand how these ideas have harmed these people sometimes help perpetuate the bad ideas that are harming these people. So it's like, it's not as much what we as a church can do. It's the fact that we need both in the church. And sometimes it's good to take a step back and say, which one am I? I think I talk about, I can't remember if it's the first book or the second book. Sometimes we need to be a nurturing mama bear, and sometimes we need to be a warrior mama bear. And we need to have both in the church. And we can't keep painting things as these nice, neat little categories, because human beings will never be nice, neat little categories. We have to treat them as individuals and kind of assess the problem before we just do wide sweeping policies of this is how we're going to solve something.
Well, and you talk about something that I think is very imperative, and that's the root cause of doubt. So how do you help someone? They're trying to figure out who they are. Then how do you help them say, okay, let's go to the root cause of your doubt? Because most people aren't skilled enough to A, understand they have one, and B, how to get to it.
Oh, golly. Yeah. I think that's one of those things that comes from hearing people's stories. Like, I love the idea of sharing stories in terms of getting to know each other and knowing how we tick. In terms of whether or not something being true, I would say stories aren't necessarily helpful for that all the time, because every Muslim will give you their story of how they found that Islam was true. Every Mormon will give you their story. Every Buddhist will give you their story. So what makes our story different from these stories? So we use stories to get to know each other, but then we don't use them to establish the veracity of a claim. So I think just being in relationship, I mean, honestly, Beth, I think we've forgotten how to be in face-to-face relationships.
True.
And I honestly don't know how to fix this outside of society, like radically getting away from, especially for parents. I mean, these sports schedules that they have are insane. And every single club that kids have are insane. There's this competitiveness of, oh, we want to be first in the state for this, or we want to be first in the state for that. There's a phrase that I've heard before: if the devil can't make you bad, he'll make you busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we are in an absolute busy, crazy society. And actually, one of the things I thought was really beautiful about COVID is it made everybody stop.
Yeah.
And say, do I need all these things? So I think getting back into that personal face-to-face relationship, I think as parents, prioritizing that, making your house the house that everybody wants to come
Mm-hmm.
to. And I'll just say the kids will always go to the house that has the best food. So if you're able to buy the best food, that is a small price to pay for having lots of face-to-face interaction with your kids. But even adults, I think prioritizing having that in-person time, so much of our mental health and identity is worked out in community, because again, going back to the concept of telos, we were created for community and
Yeah.
not this shallow community. And you take us away from that telos, and what do you get? You get
Yeah.
anxious, depressed individuals.
Well, so let's look at that. So people are scared to talk about anything
Mhm.
because talk about community and authentic community. And you've got the political divide, you've got the racial divides, you've got
Yep.
the identity divides, you've got Bible people, not Bible people.
Mm.
So people are scared to talk about anything because they don't want to make anybody angry.
Yeah.
They don't want to, step on people's toes or offend. I mean, a lot of people have issues in their own family they don't know how to deal with. I'm pretty sure everybody has issues in their own family they don't know how to deal with.
Yeah.
So we've lost the ability to engage in things that are very important
Yeah.
because we're scared of the anger and the outlash that we see on the news. So how do you help people engage on things when you
Mhm.
might not necessarily agree with things, but you want to be friends and you want to help people and you want to be in their life?
I find that there's a lot of things that people struggle with that if you just say it out loud, suddenly you can get the problem to go away. For example, with the racial issue, I have friends of color, and I've like, you know what? My pastor has something where he'll go like this. This means he's like, I'm gonna need an umbrella of grace here. Umbrella of grace means I'm about to talk through something that might offend someone. I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly. I'm not sure if I'm identifying this correctly, but I need to talk about this. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think being able to be like, can we have this conversation knowing that I'm probably going to say something stupid? I might offend you, but can we just love each other while we try? Because if we make it to where all these conversations have to be perfect until we can have them, that's one of the things that just increases the divide. Is there's this fear on both
Yeah.
sides. One person's afraid of offending the other one. The other person's just waiting for the other person to say something stupid. If we can make everybody laugh and be like, I'm probably going to say something stupid here, feel free to correct me, but let's just love each other while we're trying to have this conversation. Bringing that fear out and stating it and putting it into the open can a lot of times diffuse that tension. I would say that would be the first thing.
Yeah,
And then
that's good.
secondly would be what we go through in our first book, which is the ROAR method. The ROAR method stands for recognize the message, offer objective discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and then reinforce these ideas with your kids through discussion, discipleship, and prayer. But one of the things that I think people have a tendency to do is they only want to engage on the points where they disagree. So there's
Right.
something that I lovingly call the affirmation burger, where you start out with, I'm in the offer discernment. We teach kids, okay, everything's going to be a mixture of truth and lies. We separate the truth from the lies, accept the truth, reject the lies. So every single person that you're talking to, y'all probably have something that you agree on. How
Right.
much are we searching for what we agree on, to where we
Mm-hmm.
can say, we both agree this is a problem? Let's just say the border crisis. Everybody will agree the border crisis is a problem. Now everybody's going to have different ideas about what the solution should be. But man, can we come together over all the things of, like, there's the border crisis of being safe, but also these are all people that are coming across. Man, that would be so hard to be as kids, separated from their families, all the things. You start with your affirmation of what do you all agree on. Then you move into, yeah, but in spite of that, I just wonder about, or is this the best solution? And you kind of interject that thing that maybe you might possibly disagree on, and then you end it again. But I totally agree. Yeah, this is something that requires compassion and love, and these are real people. So you're always just buffering on both sides of things that you disagree with things that you agree with, and you're asking the person to partner with you in this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just spouting off why you think XYZ is true. And I think that right there invites people into discussion, instead of inviting people to be like, we completely disagree on this. We want to find what we have in common first.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. So, we talked a little bit in the beginning about purpose, and I do a lot of work with people on helping what I like to call the process of elimination, eliminating what's not your purpose. So
Yeah.
the identity crisis that we see so many people having, is that because of a lack of understanding of godly purpose?
Mm. Oh, yes, I do think so. We've got different types of purposes. I'm going to say there's purposes for humans that is going to be similar for everybody. And then there's purposes for individual people that's going to be different from everybody. And so we have to recognize that the way we were created to function, things that are for everybody, we are all created to live in community. I think of that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks. It's like if he couldn't have community, by golly, he made community out of that volleyball.
Exactly. He did.
Um, our sexuality has a godly telos purpose, and when we get away from that, that's something that's the same for everybody. In fact, I've done studies. A lot of people say that. Well, it's just not accepting all these sexual minorities that causes the anxiety and all these things. So I Googled, I was like, what is the most accepting country in the world? And I believe it was Norway. And so I found a Norwegian study that talked about all the different sexualities. And what you saw is with every step the people got away from a biblical view of sexuality, the reportings of suicidal ideation and attempts just kept increasing in the most accepting society. So we have a purpose for us as humans that is built into our sexuality, that when we deviate from that, we get off track. And so then we have to go to, okay, once I know what it means to be human, how do I know how to be the human Hillary? It's like sometimes we're trying to be the Hillary before we're trying to be the human. And, Hillary, obviously that's me. But what is my specific purpose within already acting the way that I was created to, or living in the way I was created to be? So for me, I think it's really helpful, especially as moms, is paying attention to what your kids gravitate towards when they're young. Because a lot of times they don't know how to fake it when they're young. And I look at all the things that I did when I was young. I started journal writing when I was 7 years old. I've got boxes of journals. And yet it never occurred to me that maybe I was a writer. It's something I had to discover later. Or the fact that I love to analyze things. It's like I wanted to talk about ideas with my dad. So I love to analyze things. Part of my purpose is analyzing things. And I think we also need people to realize, and this is especially important for youth, sometimes the thing that God has gifted you in, that he's called you to later, are the things that get you ostracized when you're younger. So like a lot of people did not like my level of analyzation. So I wasn't exactly always, sitting at the popular table because they want to talk about parties and boys and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there going, well, what do you think about the New Testament manuscripts? What about the Dead Sea Scroll? I was interested in all these ideas and stuff. Maybe I wasn't the most popular one then, but that skill, if I could go back to that teenage skill, I would say all the things that make you feel like a weirdo are going to be the things that God uses you in. And so like I have a high school girl that I'm mentoring right now that talks about, how she's kind of this perfectionistic and she has to have a schedule. If you get her off her schedule at all, her body just goes crazy. And I said, let's stop for a moment and say, you know what? God has a purpose for you in the future where they need someone exactly like you who will physically get sick if you get off a schedule. And there's going to be some purpose out there that needs someone made exactly like that. And so can we just stop and thank the Lord for making you this way and asking him to show us, use our godly imagination. What are some of the things that this might be able to be used for in the future? That right there, bypassing what does it mean to be a human? This would be, what does it mean to be Hillary or to be Beth or whoever it is? And saying, these are the things that I'm predisposed to. What are some ways that I see God using it, and how can I thank him for that? And be aware when maybe those opportunities come along. And once people find those kinds of things where they can start living in their God-given proclivities like that, man, you just see them flourish. You see them just come alive. I know that like when I get up to speak, some people like public speaking is supposed to be one of people's most anxious things. For me, that's me getting in my happy place. Like I love being able to stand up and explain stuff. I don't care if it's back when I was a teacher and it was just me and a gang kid that I was trying to teach biology to. I love being up in front of him and helping to explain stuff. It doesn't matter if I'm in front of 1,000 people or a single gang kid. I
Mhm.
love to do that. And so
Yeah.
helping people find those things, and sometimes it's a little more generic than that. They love problem solving, and when you see them trying to solve a problem, okay, let's find something for you where your job is solving problems. So that would
Yeah.
be kind of like that second layer of identity. That first layer of identity being, how do I maintain my telos as a human? And then that second layer, how do I maintain my telos as this human, the way God created me to be?
And I love that because when I speak, I talk about who is Beth. You know, yes, I'm
Hmm.
married, but I'm not Fred. I'm not my kid.
Hmm.
I have 2 kids. I have grandkids. I'm still Beth. So
Hmm.
you have to. I love the way you put that, is because I think we wrestle with roles.
Yeah.
And yes, I love being a wife or a mom or a worker or whatever, but still Beth is the core of that
Hmm.
being. And I think that's really an important thing that we remember. And then the second thing you said in all of that is we beat ourselves up so often for things God has given us.
That
So
we
why
don't
not
look like
accept?
everybody else.
Right, we don't look like everybody else. Our gifts just aren't the same as
Hmm.
everybody else. And but we get on social media, and then I kind of want to end on this because I think
Hmm.
this is influencing us a lot. Then we get on social media and we see what other people are doing, and I become less Beth and I become more Hillary. I'm like, oh well,
Yeah.
Hillary did a book about apologetics. I think that's a great idea. I love mama bearing, so maybe I'll do some of that. But that's not Beth. That's
Yes.
Hillary.
Hmm.
So let's talk about the influences that take us away from who we are, and
Yeah.
how to recognize we can learn from others, but we don't try to emulate or become them.
Yeah. No, social media is one of those just things where, I mean, I'm so thankful that I grew up not having that. If I had grown up with that, I think I would be so confused about who I was, because I even had a poem that I wrote when I think I was either in middle school or early high school, where I was describing myself as one of those mirror balls. Because I
Mm.
had a lot of just identity. I had a lot of identity confusion all growing up, and one of the things that confused me was, well, when I'm around these people, I kind of act like that, but when I'm around these people, I have these interests.
Yeah.
Like, who am I? But what I discovered, but it was funny. I described myself as a mirror ball that I kind of reflect whoever I'm with. It wasn't until I was an adult that I realized, oh, there's actually a good purpose for that. It makes it to where I can minister to different groups because I automatically start taking on some of the traits that they have, and that's actually, how crazy was it that I like actually got it right back then, but I
That
thought it was
is, yeah.
I thought it was a defect. So just yeah, I think we're always looking for clues about who we are, and this especially affects our youth. I remember being a high school youth worker, and there was this one girl that was the most clear, just searching for what feels comfortable, what is my identity. Like, one year she was a cheerleader, the next year she was super goth, with the dark
Yeah.
hair and the baggy jeans. The next year she was like the cute little snowboarder, and I'm thinking, this girl's trying to figure out, which group do I fit in with the most. And especially for extroverts, we take our cues from the outside. A lot of times introverts, they can sometimes be a little more grounded in who they are, because they take their cues from the inside. Extroverts are like kind of always looking to see, how is this playing to other people, because that's how we process information. And so social media can be bad in the sense that we have people telling us who we are, or we see people who are flourishing and we say, well, I want to flourish. So that's what flourishing looks like, instead of that's what it looks like for that person to flourish. And so just
Or
helping.
is it really even flourishing because they put their
Yeah.
flourishing hat on before they post, and they may be falling apart when we're not seeing it. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
not real.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a prayer, and we have a upcoming book coming out next year called Honest Prayers for Mama Bears.
Yeah.
And one of them is on social media. And we talk about it in there, of like, it's basically us trying to lie to each other and competing over whose lie is the most convincing. Why do we
Yes.
keep participating in this? Because that's
Yes.
exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
Like, the Lord did not make me very capable of doing that. That's another thing that made me kind of weird and made me kind of not fit in, is I can't fake things a lot of times. We always joke that if my mouth doesn't say it, my face will. And so, like, again, it's one of those things where I always thought this was something wrong with me, but it's made it to where I can really just be authentic in a way that other people struggle with, because I don't even know how to control that.
Mhm.
But this is where you don't show those things necessarily out to your online people. These are people who are almost trying to, if I can make people believe this is true about me, then I'll feel like it's true about me. It's almost like a self-medication. And it's because they're not in that one-on-one relationship, that in-person relationship where everybody can admit what a hot mess they are. And then let's talk about all our different hot messes.
Yeah. Amen. So let's end on this question, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we've talked about a lot of really great substantive things, but say someone is struggling with their identity and they're like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh my gosh, I really wish I knew who my Beth is. Really wish I knew who my Hillary was." But
Yeah.
I'm all mom, I'm all wife, I'm all worker bee, I'm all CEO. How do you get back to that question of, okay, who is my core being? God
Mm-hmm.
created me. How do we get back to have that conversation with God who made us
Yeah.
and begin to get comfortable with who we are in our own skin? And not only that, but who we're not in our own skin.
Yeah. And this is one of those things where this is going to be a different struggle for different people, because you can start on this journey and become very myopic and become almost narcissistic and trying to obsess over who you are. I think sometimes there's certain roles that we have that kind of, well, I'll call it the tyranny of the urgent, that what you have to
Yeah.
do supersedes who you are. And sometimes you have to get through that stage. I would say with young moms, especially with multiple children, sometimes you don't have the luxury of figuring out who you are. You just need to make sure that no one's killing each other, no one's drowning in the pool, and everybody's
Yeah.
fed, and the house isn't a complete wreck. And
Yeah.
so there's sometimes when it's like you just don't have the luxury of doing that. But I think that one of the number one things that we can do, and I wish we would do this instead of social media, is journaling.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out, I find that I just learned so much about myself through journaling. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll write something out that I've heard in my head, and then I think, I don't believe that. Or, even talking with someone, I had a friend where we were just really great with saying lots of things that if someone were listening to our conversation, they probably would have been like, because it's like sometimes we needed to say it out loud and then be like, yeah, no, that doesn't sound right. I don't think I believe that. But to someone else, it might sound like we do. So again, that would be just kind of that process with yourself and process with other people, and allow it to gradually reveal itself. I think people want to have this big aha moment
Right.
instead of allowing it to gradually reveal itself. And you start realizing, oh, I have different traits that keep coming out. Paying attention with our business, we have stopped paying attention to our bodies. There
Mm-hmm.
is a wisdom that our bodies have that we have shut ourselves off from, especially when it comes to like sleep and eating and all these things.
Right.
We learned how to pay
So
attention to
true.
that. Yeah. That we'll learn, this makes me really uncomfortable and this makes me really anxious. Like the girl that I'm mentoring, I was telling you about how she found that if she gets off schedule, it physically makes her sick. Or she went on a mission trip and she didn't have access to a lot of food or the times that she needed the food. And so she got physically anxious and physically sick. And I said, well, okay, now we know that we'll call her Amanda. Now we know Amanda needs to have snack bars with her every time she goes on a trip, so that if everybody can't stop, Amanda still has ability to eat, because we know that affects you. She is listening to her body. And again, we think it has to be all these profound things of things that I love doing, but sometimes our bodies are crying out, slow down,
Mm-hmm.
feed me better food. You need to rest. And we are ignoring them. And I'll say I'm the first one this is something I've struggled with for years, because I have chronic health conditions. And I learned very early on as a student, having to go to school every day, that I was not allowed to listen to my body and be able to rest when I needed to rest. And so as an adult, I've had to go through we know that my body produces cancer. And a lot of times that corresponds to periods of extreme stress where I've
Mm-hmm.
not listened to my body about what I needed for sleep and for rest and for food. And it's kind of this revenge of reality that your body will make you finally stop if it's been asking you to stop forever and you don't. So anyway, I was going off into that saying sometimes it's not the profound. Sometimes we need to start with the simple, and then we need to let it kind of reveal itself slowly, and
Yeah.
being pleased with even just the little bits that we discover, and then write them down. I can't say this enough. Write them down. Like I have a notebook that's like things I've learned about myself. And when I find something that's absolutely something that I've learned, I write it down, and then I read it on a regular basis, to where I know when I try to deviate from that, that's going to make me feel stressful, or it's going to make me feel stressed, or it's going to make me feel anxious or get sick or whatever. And I have to remember, this is why God had the people always building these altars, because when there was some big aha moment, he's like, you're going to need something to remember this aha moment. So have a place where you can remember your aha moments, because you will forget them like that.
That's so true. That's so true. And I have to ask you this question, because it kind of goes to what we're talking about. The Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay as mama bears or daddy bears or whatever. We get to love ourselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
We get to listen to our bodies and take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
How important is that? Because it is very important that we take care
Yes.
of ourselves.
Yeah, and I think just even the phrase self-care has been hijacked where some people say, "Oh, self-care, I have to go get my nails done." No one has to get their nails done. Yeah, that might, it manifests in different ways. So like for me, I really do legitimately need massages or else my body starts getting, and I need a certain amount of sleep. Or certain, there can be bonuses of things that we want. Like we were like, maybe if we do have the finances to do something extra like that, yeah, go ahead and do that extra. But let's get back to the basics, knowing when I need sleep, knowing when I need to rest. And if I have to push through this amount of time where I need to rest, like I was talking to my assistant who's getting sick, but she has 3 young kids. And I said, okay, you need to find someone, have them take the kids so you can rest. And so just making that purposeful. And I think, again, this also happens in community. What would happen if we as women and as moms in community uh, said, let's take each other's kids during certain times when we are absolutely about to just say, toast, I cannot handle things, that we just have this revolving thing where we take each other's kids for a period of time when we need something.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
we have to
That's
carve
good.
out that time. We have to be willing to ask for help. We have to be willing to receive help. And I think, and we can't compare ourselves to each other. Like that's when again, been one of my hardest things is comparing myself to other people. Cause my husband and I say, I have a type A personality and a type B body where I'm very motivated. I love to study. I'm a go-getter, but my body is just, it can't,
Yeah.
it's really prevented me from doing a lot of things that I wanted to do. I can't compare myself to what other people can do. That game of comparisons is so dangerous.
It is.
So we'll say that we have 2 different demographics. We have the one where they are not listening at all and they're just running themselves into the ground. And then we sometimes have another demographic who is not as much looking for health as they are for pampering. And those are different. Just saying that they think, oh, I need all these things. And, mama needs this, mama needs that. These are 2 different demographics. We can't get those confused because we're going to give permissions to one and we're going to give condemnations to another when it should be switched. So I just want to recognize that we have different personalities. And so knowing yourself maybe of which one of those are, do you need permission to ask for rest, or are you one of the ones that are always taking things and calling it self-care and calling it healthcare when maybe it's not?
Yeah. Very good points. Very good points. So your books are available. So you have Mama Bear Apologetics. So if anyone wants to have some information, maybe you didn't grow up knowing the Bible and things like that, and you want that information. So if you're in a conversation and you're like, I freeze when I don't know what to say, then that book is right for you. You have many resources to help people with information that is apologetic. It helps you enter into a conversation with the knowledge that you need, correct?
Correct. And ways to start addressing these with your kids so that they're building an accurate and a robust Christian worldview from the time that they're little, and start showing kind of all the little lies that have snuck in, because a lot of times it's like handing someone a bunch of soil, but there's these little seeds that are planted in there that shouldn't be in there. It's like, how do we find those little seeds and make sure that those don't grow? And so like the first book is all about what we call the isms that have kind of these ideologies that have seeped into culture that are actually making it more difficult for our kids to have faith in Christ. And then the second book is Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality, where we do talk a lot about what does it tell us of a human in regards to sexuality, and how can we explain this to little kids? How can we explain it to our teenagers? And what is maybe some research that we've seen that actually affirms this, to where everybody knows that we are looking out for people's best. We're loving on them. We're not condemning them, but we're just encouraging them to follow the telos as God has created them, because that will lead to a satisfied human. More satisfaction.
So if you're trying to figure out how to have the conversations out in public or at home around the table, these are the books, the Mama Bear books. And you have a whole team, you've got research, you've got the knowledge, and this is experience plus this information. And so we'll put those in the links below so everybody can know how to get the books, because there's not a lot of books that are geared like that. There's a lot of feeling books, but this is feelings and facts. And I think that's the important thing, is it's feelings and facts. So I could talk to you all day. I mean, but we won't, but we'll definitely come back around and do this again, because these are really great topics and people need to know it's okay to get out there in the world and engage with others and how to do it.
Yeah.
So thank you, Hillary, so much for being with us. Thank you for all the work you've done, the research. Thank you for joining us today. And we'll definitely come back around and do this again.
Thank you. That would be great.
All right. Thanks so much. We have a lot of people watching. We have some good comments. We thank you so much. We've even got one from Kenya. So we're grateful for people watching. And
hello from Kenya.
Stay tuned. We'll come back around and do this again. Everybody have a great day.